Tom Brady was talking about pro football, and this is on his weekly appearance on the Boston radio station, WEEI. And here's Tom.
I think in some ways it's pro football is more of glorified college football. Maybe the transition, it's a more similar game than what it used to be, when I first started. So I think football now is removing some of the physical elements of the game. It's more of a space game, and, you see a lot of kind of college plays, more in the pro game now than what I remember when I started. So, that's just kind of how things have went over the last bunch of years.
Yeah, I don't know how many years Tom's talking about, but it feels like this spread offense that we saw and we see in college football, it's like Big 12 football, in my opinion. It's hard to play defense. All the rules benefit the offense, and we're seeing this explosion of offensive numbers. And, Brady's been a part of this with that spread offense there. Let's bring in Peter King, NBC Sports, Football Morning in America. Must read every Monday. Pete joins us now. What do you make of Tom Brady's comments there, Pete?
Well, Dan, I think it's been I think this has been you're right. This year has really been the sort of pivot point for what's happening in football. And it's why I think the NFL really has to be careful because, in my opinion, I think when you make rules, Terry McCauley told me this now, the new NBC rules analyst, and I think he hit the nail on the head. When you make a rule, you've got to make sure that it doesn't, it doesn't put the balance way over the top to either offense or defense. And I think in what they're doing right now, I'm in San Francisco right now. I was with Joe Staley yesterday of the 49ers. And even, usually it's if your ox is not getting gored, you're happy. But Joe Staley, the 12-year offensive tackle for the Niners, basically said, I don't like the way the game is going. So you've even got respected offensive guys saying, look, the NFL's going too far. I think the NFL really is trying its best to make sure that you don't have any more Brett Hundley playing 9 games situation and in a year. But that's the sport. That's the sport. If you take too much of the teeth out of the sport, you're going to be the Western Athletic Conference. And I just think the NFL has got to really rethink how far it's gone so far this year.
Yeah, and when we had Terry McCauley on last week, he said, look, the main priority of these officials is to protect the quarterback. But I do think at some point you have to – we're never going to level the playing field because offensive numbers are up, ratings are up. The NFL understands this. Nobody's tuning in to watch defense. But I think if you want to be fair to your sport, then you have to at least have something that says to the defense – hey, we're gonna help you out a little bit here. I don't know what that is, Pete, but it just feels like every time there's a new rule, it goes against the defense.
Agreed, totally. And I think the whole thing right now is, look, I think the NFL must protect the quarterbacks, both for their long-term health and for the image of this game. But I've got to tell you, some of the roughing calls. The 4 fingers on Tom Brady's helmet against Indianapolis was absolutely absurd. The Clay Matthews and Kendricks calls in week 2. You see them every week. And look, here's the bottom line, Dan. I'm just telling you. The NFL always uses this one word with its officials, consistency. We want consistency. I want you to tell me if you're a referee and you're monitoring the pocket, what in the world are you supposed to do? I can tell you, these officials who've gotten out of the game, I'm telling you, they are thrilled to not have to adjudicate the impossible.
Talking to Peter King, NBC Sports, Football Morning in America. Giants and Eagles coming up tonight. I don't know if there's a point where, can Eli play himself out of this role this year?
Dan, the funny thing about this Eli thing is that everybody is talking about Eli as though this is sort of a new thing. Dan, this has been happening for years. It's been, Eli is quite possibly, and there's been a lot of great ones over the years, the best, most gentlemanly, high-achieving player since I've been around New York sports. And I've lived in the area since 1985. He's an amazing human being who does a lot for his community and all that. But has anybody been watching football the last 5 or 6 years? I mean, by most metrics, he's in the lower quadrant and maybe even lower than that in almost everything. And I don't know what people thought was going to happen this year. Eli needs to have tremendous protection.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. He needs to have great protection. And this offensive line, even though it's got some new pieces, is not protecting Eli nor creating enough lanes for Saquon Barkley. And so when that happens, the offense is going to be abysmal, and that's pretty much what you've seen.
But based on that, was Saquon still the right pick? If
I don't think so, and
okay.
I never did think
right.
so. I mean, I've always thought, and look, I totally respect Dave Gettleman because I think he believed, and this was told to me, that there was not one of these quarterbacks, even after Mayfield, who he loved enough to take anywhere very high. So if that's what he chose, the Giants basically now have to think that in the top 5 next year, which is probably where they'll be drafting, in the top 5 next year, they're going to have to get a quarterback, maybe the Oregon kid, or look, I don't know. I don't watch much college football, so they're going to have to get one of those guys. They probably should have gotten them this year. But look, Dave Gettleman has proven it his last 2 drafts.
Yeah.
He's taken Christian McCaffrey, number 8. He's taken Saquon Barkley, number 2. He goes against the grain, and he's a little bit of a personnel dinosaur in that regard.
What did you make of Odell Beckham and his sit down with ESPN?
I don't know. I think it was almost like Lil Wayne was his blanket. Was his security, whatever. I don't really understand why that was a together interview, but I don't know. I guess they're friends. Look, Odell Beckham took the money, and he's got to accept the fact that, why do you sign the contract if you've been begging for the contract?
Yeah. And
you sign the contract, and you have 4 or 5 bad weeks, I guess 4 at the time he did that interview. And all of a sudden it's time to jump ship. Dude, you're not going anywhere. You better make the best of this.
The Cowboys situation, it feels like there's, an undercurrent there with Dak Prescott as, the future of this franchise as their quarterback. You've got, Jerry and Dez and Alan Hearns questioning Dak Prescott. And so what do you make of the Cowboys so far this season?
I make that Dak Prescott simply has to be better. I thought Troy Aikman had some telling comments on the radio in Dallas this week on the ticket where he said essentially, a quarterback has to anticipate stuff that happens in the secondary, and he simply has to be more accurate, or he has to be an accurate passer. And I think those are the 2 things right now that you see that are troubling Dak Prescott. And I understand they don't have the franchise receiver. A lot of teams don't have a franchise receiver, and they figure out a way to get it done. I think the other issue here is Jerry Jones, Jason Garrett. The funniest quote of the week was Jerry Jones saying, "I'm not second-guessing, but we should have gone for it on 4th and 1. How hilarious was that? But look, Pro Football Focus does numbers for my column every week, and I asked them this week what were the chances of the Cowboys making that 4th down that when Garrett punted and they came back. I forget, it was either 73 or 75%. And so, there are times in the NFL where you got to take chances. I didn't even think that was a particular chance. The chance to be taken was punting the ball and hoping to get it back and be able to score and win the game. And obviously they didn't do that. So I think in general, Dan, I think we've seen a shift starting last year with Doug Peterson. Coaches are basically throwing away the old book. They're throwing away the right wing book. And I think they're doing stuff that is not only a little bit out there in traditional football, but is a smarter play than, Frank Reich 63% chance that they were going to make that play on 4th and 4, against Houston when everybody's killing Frank Reich. Well, that's better than 50%. Now, you can question what categories Pro Football Focus is using, but I've seen it, and I've seen how they do that. It all seems logical to me. And the fact is, there are times when you have to say to your team, look, it's a smarter idea, even though this seems very against the grain. And just look and see what Doug Peterson did all last year. He set the stage for what's happening right now, and I think coaches need to go to school on this and go to school on it pretty quick.
How desperately do you think the Eagles are trying to secure a running back, if it's LaShawn McCoy or Le'Veon Bell?
I think they have to get one, and I don't think they want to saddle themselves with another salary, like Le'Veon Bell. They don't have the wiggle room right now long term to be paying Le'Veon Bell like QB2. They don't have that kind of money right now long term to spend. McCoy makes more sense to me. I think it's interesting. Over the next 2 weeks, I think if the Bills lose a couple of games, that Brandon Beane is hugely a fan of remaking his team. He's had no hesitancy in trading with anybody for anything at any time. Howie Roseman is pretty much the same thing. So it wouldn't surprise me. I'm not anticipating it, but it wouldn't surprise me. But they definitely have to go out and get some help in their backfield.
What would be your biggest concern with the Rams right now, or maybe long term this season?
Injuries in the secondary. Marcus Peters wasn't himself last week, and since he's been hurt, they're obviously without Talib maybe for the season, but at least for 8 or 10 weeks. That's the biggest concern I would have. Like, what happens if? And then I'm throwing this out there because obviously we're only about 4 months ahead of ourselves. What happens if they play in the Super Bowl against Kansas City with the existing rosters that each team has, with the trouble that the Rams are having in the secondary now? They don't have a great outside rush at all. They barely have a good outside rush. And so if Patrick Mahomes essentially has that secondary to throw against and the ability to run around and escape, the interior rush that the Rams have, I probably would like the Chiefs in that game. But, again, it's a long season. You never know. But the secondary of the Rams, I think, would be concerning.
Pete, good to visit with you. Safe travels. Thanks for joining us, as always.
Hey, you're welcome, Dan. Have a great day.
That's Peter King, NBC Sports Football Morning in America column.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.